Welcome back to America Decides. While on the campaign trail, President-elect Donald Trump vowed to shutter the U.S. Department of Education, and an effort to do so is already in the works before his second term begins. Last week, South Dakota Republican Senator Mike Rounds introduced this legislation that would abolish the department 180 days after the bill becomes law. But if the Education Department is actually eliminated, how exactly would that affect school systems across the country? Erica Meltzer may have the answer. She's national editor at Chalkbeat, a nonprofit news organization that covers education in the U.S. Erica, let's start right there. Try to draw a line, if you can, between eliminating the Department of Education and K-12 schools or higher ed in America.
I think it's really important for people to understand that most school funding comes from the state and local level, and that we will still have public education if the Department of Education goes away. The department only goes back about 40 years. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Education provides a lot of important functions. They provide billions of dollars in funding to high-poverty schools. They provide guidance around civil rights enforcement and how to best serve children with disabilities. And they provide a lot of higher ed functions as well, for example, running the financial aid system. And so I do think people would notice if the department went away.
We know the Department of Education tried to navigate that crisis this year with the free application for student aid, the FAFSA program. Does this embolden the proposals to get rid of the department, or is that a firewall against proposals to get rid of the department because you see the impact they can have on student loan applicants?
I think a lot of the proposals to get rid of the department, sort of what would the impact be? It depends on sort of, like, for example, that's a function. Some people think it should go away entirely. Some people would say that could be handled elsewhere within the government. I do think the problems with the FAFSA, which were real, did give more energy to this idea that it's an overloaded bureaucracy that's not really serving students. But at the same time, there have been conservative calls to abolish the Department of Education going back to Reagan. This is not a new idea. It did not emerge, fully formed from the FAFSA debacle.
What's another part of the portfolio of this department folks might be familiar with? I always associate it with Title IX, but what are the things this department does in a more granular way that does impact citizens and folks' lives?
Well, Title IX is a great example. Title IX protects against sex discrimination, and in more recent years, it's been interpreted to also protect students on the basis of gender identity, and that's been a real point of contention between conservatives and progressives in American schools, something that we could absolutely see change under the Trump administration. And in general, civil rights enforcement is a function of the Department of Education that typically looks very different under Republican and Democratic administrations. And so, for example, you could see civil rights enforcement. There are ways that could be used to go after DEI initiatives or what the Republicans have deemed sort of woke ideologies in education. They also do kind of boring things like highlight research into educational practices and help schools understand, if you're working with English learners or if you're trying to improve math instruction, here are the things that are evidence-based that could actually help students. And so some of those functions are potentially in danger.
Erica, Politico's reporting today on how Republicans across the U.S. are pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into private education in spite of voter and strong union resistance. Do those initiatives have enough political support to make an impact, a lasting impact on U.S. education?
This is something that's really developing at the state level. We have, I believe, a dozen states now that have universal school vouchers. There's a bunch of other states that could be passing legislation in 2025. And this is a major change in public education that we're sort of in the middle of figuring out what is this going to look like, how many families are going to participate, what is going to be the financial impact, what does it look like if you still have a very robust public education infrastructure, or are you going to end up with a situation where the highest need students remain in public education and a lot of other families have departed to private education? A lot of that's playing out at the state level. It started to develop under the Biden administration, so it wouldn't necessarily have been stopped if Kamala Harris had been elected. But I think we will see more support for school choice at the federal level under a Trump administration.
Just a moment left, Erica. Trump's pledge of mass deportations What impact might that have on schools?
So it's been really unclear, sort of how much he can actually carry out this pledge, and to what extent it will affect sort of regular working people versus people who are maybe already in the criminal justice system in some regard. But we have seen in the past, when immigration enforcement has carried out these large-scale workplace raids in communities, thousands of children can see their parents detained overnight, and it has huge ripple effects on public education.
We covered a lot of ground there, didn't we? Erica Meltzer, I appreciate you making time for us on a holiday week. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.